There is a hidden art to how narcissists operate, a subtle manipulation that taps into the very essence of a person's emotional and spiritual vulnerabilities. The power of a narcissist often lies in their ability to exploit an individual's triggers, those deep-seated wounds that are buried in the psyche from past trauma, often originating in childhood. A trigger is not just a fleeting moment of discomfort. It is a powerful gateway to the inner turmoil that most people have unconsciously tucked away to survive. This vulnerability becomes fertile ground for narcissistic abuse. A narcissist's aim is not to merely control the present moment, but to distort it. They use triggers as their most potent weapon, ensnaring their victims in cycles of confusion, fear, and emotional volatility. At the core of this dynamic is the victim's distorted perception of reality. A trigger operates through the body's natural fight or flight response, activating intense fear, anger, shame, or guilt, emotions that are rooted in past traumas. The narcissist plays on these feelings, carefully creating scenarios that feel eerily familiar to the victim. Scenarios that mimic those early experiences of abandonment, neglect, or betrayal. When a narcissist activates a trigger, they set in motion a dissociative spiral. The victim's present moment awareness becomes warped by emotional flashbacks. They are no longer engaging with the narcissist as they are in the present, but instead are reliving past traumas. The narcissist's words or actions become symbols, powerful reminders of the pain, rejection, or humiliation that still lingers within. This is how narcissists maintain control. By triggering these old wounds, they keep their victims in a state of emotional reactivity. In this state, it becomes nearly impossible for the victim to engage with the present moment, let alone see the situation with clarity or calm. However, the process is far more sophisticated than this. The narcissist does not simply activate random triggers. They skillfully hone in on the exact emotional injuries that will elicit the strongest reactions. It's as though they are weaving together a psychological web, manipulating their victim's sense of self-worth, dignity, and autonomy. Narcissists are particularly adept at exploiting triggers tied to abandonment or inadequacy. They may withdraw affection, make subtle insults, or deliberately ignore their victim's boundaries, all the while appearing reasonable or even caring. The victim, in turn, is thrown into emotional chaos, unsure of whether their response is rational or exaggerated. The power of the trigger lies in its ability to hijack the nervous system. The victim becomes trapped in a physiological response that mirrors their earliest traumas. Their body and mind begin to operate as though they are back in that vulnerable state, making them feel helpless, anxious, and desperate for the narcissist's approval or validation. This is where the true insidiousness of the narcissist comes in. They exploit this desperation to reinforce the victim's dependency on them. But this is not just a psychological game. There are deeper spiritual implications to consider. The trigger response dynamic in the hands of a narcissist becomes a tool of energetic manipulation. Narcissists thrive on the energy they siphon from their victims. This is often referred to in esoteric teachings as a form of psychic vampirism. By keeping their victims in a perpetual state of emotional reactivity, narcissists drain their life force, depleting their spiritual energy. The constant need to manage the emotional turmoil caused by triggers leaves the victim spiritually exhausted, unable to connect with their higher self or the divine source of healing and wisdom. In the metaphysical sense, triggers represent portals, gateways to past emotional injuries that once activated flood the present with the energies of fear, shame, and guilt. When a narcissist manipulates these portals, they create a spiritual distortion field, making it difficult for their victims to access their own inner light. This distortion leads to a fragmentation of the victim's sense of self, leaving them vulnerable to further manipulation and control. What is particularly destructive is the way narcissists reinforce the very beliefs that keep these triggers alive. For example, if a person's trigger revolves around feelings of worthlessness, the narcissist will subtly or overtly feed into that belief. They may criticize the victim in ways that seem harmless or even constructive, but the underlying message is clear: you are not enough. Over time, the victim internalizes these messages, further strengthening the trigger and creating a self-perpetuating cycle of abuse. But this script is not meant to dwell only on the darkness of narcissistic abuse. It is meant to empower those who are on a path of spiritual healing, those who are seeking to reclaim their inner power. The first step in this reclamation is awareness. Understanding how triggers work, both on a psychological and spiritual level, is key to breaking the cycle. When one can recognize that a narcissist is deliberately manipulating their emotional wounds, the grip of the trigger begins to loosen. The power dynamics start to shift. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires not only psychological resilience, but also spiritual fortitude. It involves reclaiming the energy that has been siphoned away and closing the portals of past trauma that narcissists seek to exploit. This is where practices such as grounding, meditation, and energetic protection become essential tools in the healing process. Grounding helps the victim reconnect with the present moment, allowing them to step out of the emotional flashback and see the situation for what it is. Meditation cultivates inner stillness, making it easier to observe triggers without reacting to them. And energetic protection, whether through visualization techniques, crystals, or other spiritual practices, creates a boundary around the victim's aura, shielding them from the narcissist's manipulative energies. But the deepest work lies in addressing the core wound itself. Triggers only have power when the underlying emotional injury remains unresolved. By healing these wounds, spiritual seekers can transform their triggers into sources of strength. The same emotional portal that once opened them up to manipulation can become a doorway to profound healing and spiritual growth. When one can face the pain of the past with compassion and self-awareness, the narcissist's power over them dissolves. There is an important lesson in this process. The narcissist's abuse is not just an external assault, but a mirror of the unresolved trauma within. This realization, painful though it may be, is also liberating. It shows that the path to freedom lies within. By healing the emotional wounds that narcissists exploit, victims can reclaim their power and step fully into their own spiritual sovereignty. The journey of healing from narcissistic abuse is not easy, but it is deeply transformative. As spiritual seekers, reclaim their energy, heal their wounds, and protect their boundaries, they begin to see the narcissist for what they truly are, a wounded individual seeking to control and siphon the light of others because they have lost connection with their own. Understanding this dynamic does not mean excusing the narcissist's behavior, but it does offer a deeper insight into the spiritual nature of the abuse. Empowered by this understanding, the victim is no longer just a survivor of abuse, but a warrior of light, capable of transmuting the darkness of their past into a source of inner strength and wisdom. They become immune to the narcissist's manipulations, for they are no longer controlled by their triggers. They have learned to stand in their own power, grounded in the present moment, and fully connected to the divine source of their being. In this state of spiritual alignment, no narcissist can ever truly touch them again.